Alright, I'm gonna start streaming again.
It's not seasoned. No, I know. Once I glanced at it, I glanced quickly. Black coffee. Yeah, no sugar. Doing it for common sense change.
You're all made on the same level.
I can test it. That's what they say. When I started working nights.
Alright, I'm gonna give everyone else 1 more minute, and if they're not here, we're just gonna start. Because I said 12:15, so.
Either that or everyone was in the parking lot watching the fight.
Oh, is there a fight out there?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, in the parking garage? I was gonna say, oh, shit, let's go look.
Just go down.
Yeah. Let's go watch this first. Apparently the door's closed. Which one? Can you open the door?
Use the right door. Downstairs.
Express yourself.
Did everyone get in who was at the door?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Cool. I don't know, it's kind of irritating. Yeah. Well, they had problems with, they had problems with people coming into the building late at night and setting off the alarms. Like, right when this cohort started, and Jason kept getting chewed out, so they made the rules a little stricter. So, the city of Gilbert, I guess, was really on it. Random people, or like a student wouldn't leave or something. I don't really know exactly what happened, but... Or the wind blew the door open. I don't really know, but the alarm started going off. Cops showed up. I mean, we had that one day when we came and there was cops all over the building. It was a great time. And I'm like trying to go in. There's cops with their guns out. I'm like, so should I go in there? I was just like staring through the window at them too as they're like doing their thing. And they're like, what the fuck is this guy doing?
Is it safe to go in? I gotta teach a class.
Something like that, yeah. It was very confusing. I was like, I didn't know what was going on, but it was weird. Anyway. Yeah. Hey, you do a quid pro quo thing where they teach you how to shoot a gun and like, kill people and stuff. You teach them how to use JavaScript. Alright, so where we left off was serving up HTML as raw text from a Node application. Now we're going to see how it works if we have a file. So we have this index.html file, right? It's just like the HTML we've been doing all class. There's nothing fancy here at all. It uses some Bootstrap stuff even. So it's a pretty standard file. And then we have a server. Oh my gosh, VS Code. We have our server implementation, which is slightly different than the last one. So in the last one, we would take the path and we would just generate a string and return the string as content type HTML. This time, we're going to use the FS module, and the FS module is going to take the path to the HTML file, and it's going to then serve that file content up, right? So we don't have to type anything. We don't have to make this crazy string. We can just build our index.html like we normally would and then serve it. So what's different? Our handle request is where it's going to be different, right? This is the big difference. Instead of building a string, var HTML, whatever, and doing all that stuff, we're literally just going to take the name, the path to the index.html file, which is just the __ dir name. Does anyone know what that is? Does anyone not know what that is? So the __ dir name is this directory. It is the directory you are in right now when you execute your Node application. It's just a constant that always is there for you. So it's saying in this directory, take the index.html file, because it adds them together, and we're going to go ahead and read that. Remember, we have to have our callback. After our read callback is done, we can then take that data, because it's going to come in as a string. We can do our write head, you know, status code 200, type text HTML, and just serve up the data. So if we look at that index.html file again, there should be some Bootstrap. It should have a list of favorite things. Let's go ahead and run it. It's on port 8080, so if I go to localhost port 8080, then we get this. Pretty fancy, right? We're moving up in the world. So, I mean, that's really all it takes to serve HTML from a file. Now, if we wanted to, say if we still wanted to do our paths, right? So we wanted to say if you go to / we'll give you this file, this index.html, which is pretty true, right? Usually we have an index.html is like our home page, right? If you go anywhere else, we're going to give you a 404. How could we do that? We can go ahead and create a new HTML file. Oops. Let's create a new file. We'll call it 404.html. We'll just use that quick cheat exclamation point to make our HTML. We'll give it a title. Whoops. We'll give it a snarky message. Now we have a new HTML file. Okay, so in our handle request, now there's a couple things we can do, right? So I'm going to actually call this display home. So I'm going to change the name of that. I'm going to create a new function of handle request. And we're going to do if rec.url equals /. So instead of our switch, we're going to do an if statement this time. And then let's create a display 404 rec res. We can literally copy this code. We'll just have to make a few changes. Boop. Right here we named it 404.html, and obviously our status code now needs to be a 404, correct? And then we can go ahead and display 404 rec res. Oops, that is a period. Right, so if the path is just /, we're good, we'll go home. Otherwise, we don't know what's going on. We're just going to say it's a bad path. So let me go ahead and restart this. So remember, you have to restart the server every time you make a change if you want to see that change. Also, I forgot to mention, Charlie brought this up, you'll notice when I'm in this terminal and I start the node HTTP server, I can't do anything here. I can type, but it doesn't do anything. That's because that terminal has been taken over by that process. And until that process dies, which you do with Control-C, you can't do anything there. So if you want to do anything else, you need to open up another terminal, right? So now I'm good. I can do stuff. We're good. But it can be a real pain if you don't know that. Anyway, we restarted it. Let's just refresh here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open the Chrome DevTools so we can see... Oh, I have an error. Look at that. That's exciting. Oh, nah, don't worry about that. Well, I was looking for a favicon.ico, which it does by default, and we don't have one. So anyway, I got the status 200. If I go ahead and go to /test, it says, I don't know what you want from me. And you'll see even here, it gives you the status code 404. It tells you a little bit about it, and it shows it in red, which is really nice. So it kind of shows more about that network response. So you can interrogate it from here and get information about it. So if we look at it, say, okay, 404 not found. We can view the source if we want and see more information about the request and the response. And then you can look at the response. And this is what I got back. That's the body of the response. It's that HTML file, literally, right? So you can see exactly what you're getting back from that response. Before, when we were just doing the text, it was hello world or whatever. Now it's an actual HTML page, and the cool thing is Chrome is nice enough to actually like format the HTML and give it cool colors so you kind of know what's going on. It's just a nice thing they do. They're very kind like that at Google. So anyway, this is effectively the same as that last example where we were sending the raw text, but now we're doing it from a file. Now this is truly what your web servers are doing. They have these HTML files that you upload, and they're just like grabbing the content of the file and shooting it off. Here you go. Now with handlebars, it'll get a little bit more complicated than that because we're going to have like templating, so we'll be able to replace content in the template, but that's just another layer on top of this that ends up reading a file and sending it off. Any questions on how this works? Cool. Well, the next activity we're going to do then, activity number 5. Yeah? You have a question?
So my question is, will it still work if we export our files as a module rather than going through the file system?
Will it still work if you export the files as modules? So one thing is we can't export raw HTML as a module, right? You can only export other JavaScript. So technically you could import an object or something, and then you could do json.stringify. That's actually a good thing we could test. We're going to do that after this next example. I'll show you what I'm talking about. We can kind of do that, but for HTML, not quite, unless you were to export a string of HTML, which you'd probably read from a file anyway, right? So, not quite. But with JSON, yes, kind of. It's kind of a loaded question, but that is a really good question. Any other questions? Okay, hope I don't miss any more. Alright, so we're going to do activity number 5. Let me show you what it looks like real quick. Oh, I got to shut this down. Run it. Alright, so if I go back here to port 8080, we get welcome to my house, okay? And there's some information we can look for. We can look at our movies. So these are my favorite movies. Not my favorite, but this guy's favorite. Frameworks. Here are some frameworks you like, right? And food. Here's some food I like. Basically, the point is we want to create a server that allows us to view 4 different pages. Okay, by default, we're going to view a home page. Otherwise, we have links to a movies page, a frameworks page, and a food page. And we should return the HTML whenever we navigate to those pages. And then bonus points if you can build this in a way that you're not duplicating a bunch of code, right? So, you know, you have to get the food.html page. How can you do that with the same code that you would get maybe the movies HTML page? But that's a bonus. First, get it working. Any questions on that? Cool. You can go ahead and work in groups if you'd like. Make it easier for you. Alright, seems like everyone's probably pretty close to done, if not done already. So we'll go ahead and go over the exercise. So again, in case you don't remember the activity you just worked on for 30 minutes, we are going to be serving up HTML pages from a Node application. Alright, So we've got 4 HTML files here. We have an index, frameworks, food, and movies. They're pretty simple HTML files as far as HTML goes. They'll just have a list of your favorite regarding that topic. So for movies, frameworks, food, and then the index will just have anchor tags going to those different pages. So as far as the HTML goes, nothing too complicated, right? I mean, we've been doing HTML for a while. We know how this all works. No biggie. So let's go ahead and look at the server code, because this is where the meat and potatoes is, right? So requiring HTTP, requiring FS, we know that that's a given. We need those or we can't do anything. We set up our port. 8080 is a good one to go with. If you change yours, that's fine. We go ahead and create the server. We'll get to the handle request in a moment, and then we have the server listen, right? So that stuff's all pretty much the same. The bulk of the work is in handle request, and that's always going to be the case here. How are we going to handle the request, right? So we had the little example earlier where we could pull the URL out, we set it to a path, and then we switched on the path. It's still a good pattern. If you're going to have more than 2 or 3 options, you want to go to a switch versus an if statement. You can do the if, else, if, else, if, else if you want. It's just more work. Now, where that's still appropriate is if you want to do transformations on the path, right? So if you want to do to lower or something, well then you can go ahead and use an if statement, because then you can do to lowercase. But for this, we're just going to keep it nice and simple. Switch on the path. We had 3 paths, and then we had our default path, right? So we have a food path. When we go to the /food, we should go ahead and read the file /food.html. Remember, you add it to the dir name _ dir name, because that's your current directory. Now, if you just did ./food.html or just food.html, it might have still worked because relative pathing exists, right? So the relative path from where you're running this code are those files. And it might not have. I honestly don't know. I think it would work. It should work, but I don't know if the node process is going to do something funky. Anyway, when you read the file, you go ahead and you give it a status code. You set the content type, text HTML, and then you call resEnd. Did anyone forget to call resEnd and have a weird bug? No? That's good. You're going to do it eventually. It's good that it hasn't happened today, but when it happens, remember, you should always look at a few key things. Did you call resEnd more than once? Did you call it at all? Those are 2 good places to start when things are really weird. Did you start your service? That's another good one. Anyway, we go to /food, we grab the food HTML, in our callback, we serve it up. /movies, grab the movies HTML, in our callback, we serve it up. Frameworks, same thing, right? We call the frameworks HTML, we serve it up. Otherwise, we have a default, and when we have that default, we're going to call our index HTML and serve it up. Now, you'll probably notice that a lot of this code is the same, right? You can copy and paste it, change a couple of words, and you're, boom, good to go. Did anyone come up with a solution that's a little more effective? Yeah, Rolando? You reused a bunch of code? What'd you do?
In my handle request, I just have a variable for the ref.url, and then if the path is equal to just / although index.html, and then my read file will take my directory name / the path that I'm looking for, and then return the data.
Okay, and it worked? Nice. Very nice. You could definitely do that. So what he was doing is he had this path URL, and basically he would say if the path / right, equals /, then we're going to go ahead and return index, right?
I would set the path equal to index.html.
Oh, okay.
Because in my fs read file, I have my dir name / path, so it'll figure out what the path of the link is.
Like so?
Yeah.
So basically on the other ones, you would just take the path and add .html to the end and then load it up?
Well, my anchor tags have like the path.
Oh, okay. So the path will always come in as something.html unless it's the /, so that way you can default it. Otherwise, you could just go ahead and read file dir name plus path, right? Is that what you did? You do dir name plus path, and then effectively load it up. So that is a really good way that you could do this. You want to slack out your code, Rolando? Okay. Well, Rolando slacked out his code. Let's look at the there should be a server bonus. Let's look at how they did it. So, very similar to how Rolando did it. They used a case statement, right? They did multiple cases for one. They said if the path is something other than a slash, right? So if it's food, movies, or frameworks, then we're just going to go ahead and add HTML to it, pass it to this render HTML function. Otherwise, we're going to pass the index HTML. And then all they do in there is exactly what Rolando was doing. File path and res, right? You just take the dir name plus the path, which can be your URL path, effectively. And then you go ahead and render it up. So this is significantly fewer lines of code, for one. And I think, personally, it makes way more sense, right? Now think about if you need to go add in a different header right here. And you want it on every HTML page, you change one line of code instead of 4. So it helps to think about these things. Now, I will warn you, don't try to do this up front if you're not really familiar with the problem. Try to solve it first and then find the common patterns, right? And pull them out and solve it. If anyone else has any cool solutions they came up with, slack them out. I want to see them. The class could benefit from it too. It's good to share code, share ideas, and you can learn a lot from it. Does anyone have any questions on either of these examples or on this activity at all? Anything that we just did? Fist 5, how are we feeling about today? How's today feeling? Yeah? Pretty good. I'm seeing a lot of pretty good numbers, so that's good. Okay. Well, if the TAs could slack out the 2 solutions, and anyone else, like I said, who wants to slack out their solution, feel free. And we'll check them out in the Slack channel. They're very helpful. Okay, so we have basically only seen GET requests today, right? Because we've been serving up text, we've been serving up HTML, and all those add up to just GET requests. But we haven't seen anything else. We haven't seen a POST request. And we know what a POST is, right? We've used POST requests with jQuery and stuff. I mean, Firebase under the hood has some form of a POST request potentially, right? But anything where you're updating the content on the API requires a POST. Logins are sometimes a POST, right? Because you got to get a token or something like that. So let's go ahead and open up an example. What one is this? This one was 6. Alright, so this code is going to be quite different from what we've seen so far. And we're going to play around with it in a few ways. So, what we have is the standard stuff, pull in HTTP, set the port, we're going to create the server, we're going to listen on that port, but then we have our handle request, right? The meat and potatoes of all of this. So this one's slightly different. Before, what we were doing is reading the path potentially, or doing nothing and just sending back some content, right? Now what we're doing is we're actually taking the request and we're reading it. We're reading what's coming in on that request, the content of that request, and we're storing it in a variable called request data, and then we're going to console log out what we got. So this is kind of a funky syntax. I want to run it first, give you guys an idea of what it looks like. Actually, I'll leave it right there. Nothing. Huh, that's interesting. That's because we did a GET request, and a GET request doesn't have a body on the request. A GET request is only a request header asking for some information. So what this code is doing right here, where it says rec on data, it's basically saying if there's a body, right, if you've given me some data, I'm going to read all of it. And then when I'm done reading it, I'm going to close. And this end function is going to be called. And we can console log it out. But because I did a GET request, there's no data. So what can I do? There's this fancy tool called Postman that I told you should install. And hopefully you did. Oops. Trying to close these. And it always asks, do you want to save? No. I don't want to save. Alright. So, what can we do with Postman? Let's see if we can blow it up. Ooh, nice. That is nice. Look at that. What a good app. Anyway. Start with HTTP. What we're going to do is we're going to start making requests to our APIs from Postman. First thing, we want to try this with a post. So we're going to do http://localhost:8080. That gives us our URL. Now in Postman, you need the http://. In your browser, it adds that implicitly and then gets rid of it because you don't need it, right? It's like, oh, well, I know that that's the case, so I'm just going to get rid of it so I don't have to see it. Postman's not so smart. Postman says, you need to give me your HTTP or I'm going to assume it's something else. So you have to put http:// in front of your localhost in Postman. So what can we do next? Well, it's a post, so we have access to this body. We can click this raw one and we can send it some text.
I'm in the wrong spot. Like my body button is grayed out.
Did you set it to post or is it still set to get? So you say, this is my text. I hit send. Oh, I don't think my service is running. Make sure your service is running. Okay. I hit send. I get a 200 OK back. And in here you can say, you did a post with the data. This is my text. That's pretty cool. What else can I send? What if I send JSON? So right here you have a drop down that says text, right? I can set it to JSON. It's going to add a header for me, content type application JSON. And what it expects in this body is real formatted JSON. And I can send that JSON to my service. Now, my service got it as text. That's a text representation of what happened. So it's not too exciting. But we can change that. What we can do, because we're getting JSON in, this request data, I can actually do console.log. I can do a console log JSON parse on my request data. So if I come back here, I send it again, I get the text version, but then I get the nice formatted JSON version. That's pretty cool. That is what is happening when we make JSON requests between the browser and the web server. It comes in as text, raw text, and then I can do JSON parse and I magically have JSON. I'm going to close this. Okay, so let's go over this code a little bit because it is very different from anything we've really seen. It's got these weird .on functions. So already, what can you tell me because we have .on? This is going to have some sort of an event name, probably. It's very similar to jQuery, right? We had .on click. And then we had what? Callback. So these are event handlers, just like in jQuery, for node information. So we have this on data. So this request that's coming in, it's this special object. It's called a buffer, right? Or stream, actually. It's not too important what they are right now, but just know that they help transfer data. And in Node, they use this event syntax, kind of like the click handlers and stuff in jQuery. And what you say is, when we have data that's able to be read from this stream or this buffer, call my callback and process it. So just like if you were clicking over and over again and you had your click handler being processed and processed, this stream is basically calling this data handler over and over and over, so it's processing and processing and processing over and over again. Then when that's all done, it's like I've got all my data, we're good, we're good. It calls this end function. So this would be like your on close, or maybe it's a text change, or it's an on blur, or something like that. Doesn't matter. It's just a different event. Handled the same way as your click handlers, handled the same way as your data events, has its own callback. It calls end, and end signifies to us that the request is done processing. We need this because we don't know how much request data is coming through, right? We have no idea how large the request is. So unless end is called, we never know when we're done getting the data. It's impossible for us to know. We can't just guess. There are other ways you can figure it out, but Node is doing it for us. So we know it's done. We can call end, and then we can do what we want. We have the full spectrum of the data. So as long as it comes in properly as proper JSON, I can do JSON parse, right? This code isn't super safe. What happens if I do this service? Let's make sure it's still running. Okay, let's run it again. I'm going to go ahead and just send text. JSON parse didn't quite work. It's like, hey, that is not JSON. FJ, DKLSJ, bunch of random garbage. That's not JSON. So I don't recommend you just blindly call JSON parse, but for all intents and purposes and for showing you how it could work, it was okay. This is where that header application JSON comes into play, right? Because if we can go if rec.headers, and then you can read like content type. It's something like this. I don't know if this is the exact syntax, but we should probably console log the request headers first. But we can do this, get that set up. Let's console log rec.headers. See what we get. I'm going to set this to JSON. I'm going to have it say name is Carson. I'm going to send it. So I do have a content type set to application JSON. It's all in lowercase, so if I go here, jeez. I'll get it eventually, guys. Alright. So let's restart the service. So what this is going to do, it should parse the JSON. You can see down here, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see down there that it did indeed parse my JSON. But if I change this to text, even though I sent it as JSON, it's just text. There's no application type or content type coming in. It doesn't try to parse the JSON, and therefore, if I change this to garbage, that's definitely not JSON, it won't explode. This is how that content type header is used. This is what the headers are for, right? It's metadata about the request so that the server knows what to do. Same with the headers that come back on the response. It's metadata for the browser to know what to do. Any questions on this code? Postman is your friend. You should learn how to use it well. You will need to use it a lot when you are building APIs because it's a very easy way for you to build your API without building a UI, and you can test it, right? So you can build all this API and you can keep testing it very fast and furious like, right? You don't gotta reload anything, just boom, 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 go, go, go. You can make sure it all works before you build your UI to work with it. It's quite nice. What else can we do? So let's say we run this again. There's also a tool called curl. If you want to try to use it, it's a little bit harder. It's from the command line. From Windows, you won't have it installed by default, but you might have it in the Git Bash. But if you do curl, and you did like, I'm gonna change this to content type, application JSON. So this is going to be ugly. Ugly, ugly. it didn't work. Oh, that's probably it. Good catch. There you go. So curl, this is the raw response header right here that you get back. And you can see it's still parsed out by JSON down here. Curl's a command line way to do this. So if you get really good with curl and you know what all the headers mean, I have no idea what -I means. To be honest, I just read their example. -X is the method, -D is your data, your payload, -H is your headers. But if you get good with curl, you could do this over and over again and kind of figure it out, right? You could test stuff very fast. You could build scripts to use curl. It's just another way that you can test this stuff. I recommend you look up curl documentation if you're interested in learning more about it. We're going to use Postman in this class. It's just a lot easier than teaching you guys all how to use curl and stuff like that. Yeah. Alright, so what we're going to do now is activity number 7. You're going to build your own post request. Just like we did there. You're going to create an HTML file with a form that can post back to your API. So this one is going to be extra challenging because you need to create an HTML file. Even better if you can serve it from your Node application, and it should have a form on it, right? The form tag and everything. And when you submit that form, have it post to your web server. See if you can get that done. This one's actually extra challenging, so work in groups, because this one's going to be hard. Yeah, use of cement. So form, go back to each one more tag, which you need to send action, is an action, and then there's like a, yeah, so there'll be an action, that's the URL you're supposed to do. It's like an attribute. And then there's another one that's supposed to be a method, it might just be a method, but you have to look at form tags, the attributes of form tags. You gotta set those properly, otherwise it just refreshes the page.
Oh, and that's where I use that years ago.
Yeah, it's hard to remember that stuff too. You do it so infrequently. Make sure you check out the attributes that exist for form tags, because if you don't set them properly, it'll just refresh your page. There's two in particular you need to set. All right, let's go over this. This one was a tough one, huh? Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. Yeah, this one was real hard. I liked it though, because it kind of brings everything together. How can we build a web server that serves up HTML that then ends up requesting back to our server? This is like a full website. It is a full website, which is really cool. So you guys just built a full website. Anyway, there's a couple of things to take into consideration. In the index.html, that form, I mentioned that there's a couple of parameter attributes on the form tag that you need to set. If you don't set the method to post and the action to the URL that you're trying to get to, it's just going to refresh your page and be kind of irritating. Right? And then you need a submit button to submit it. So let me launch that code. Server.js. Let me refresh this page. Oh, test isn't going to work. Alright, so we've got a nice little form. Thank you for the data. Name Carson. My favorite band is Test. Sick band. I don't know if you guys heard of them. So what it did was took that information I entered in the form, it redirected me to this thanks page, and it also displayed the data that I had entered. And right down here too, I can see the data that I had entered. Now this name equals ampersand, band equals, this is form body format, right? So there's like a form body, URL encoded form body, JSON, plain text. There's all kinds of different ways you can send content back to a server. This is what form content looks like. Raw form content. It's like a key value pair separated by ampersands. Anyway, what does the code look like? So if we go here to just the home page, you'll see it switches on the path, and if it doesn't equal /thanks, we're just going to get the default welcome page. So this one has a couple extra things in it to make it a little nicer. So for some reason, if there's an error when reading the index.html page, it'll send back a 500 status code and like an error HTML. So we can actually mimic that, see what it would look like. That's what you'd get if there was a problem loading the data in this case. And that's something you can do too on your servers. Add extra error handling code, so if something bad does happen, you can just return like a special 500 page. It's like, oh, something really bad happened. Anyway, if we read the content fine, we're fine. We'll just send the content back with the 200 status code, and we'll get this form, the simple form, right? A-okay, we're good. So the thank you page is a little different. If we look back at the index.html, you can see that the form has an action going back to that /thanks route, right? And it's a method type post. So what it's going to do is when you hit submit, it's automatically going to make a post request to that endpoint. So down here, it's going to come back. It's going to have the path URL, which is going to be thanks. So it's going to do the render thank you page. What that's going to do is set this request data to nothing. It sets some default HTML, which is just that 500 page. And then it's going to try to get the data from the request. Remember, we have request.on for all the data that's sent to us. We listen for that. We pull it from the request, and when we have it, we can, this is some of the data. We can console log it. Here's some of the data that you've requested, right? Then we can inject it into the HTML page that we're going to send back, right? So we have our data. We're going to reset this variable, myHTML, to a new HTML page. It's going to show us our content. And then when the request is done, we can serve it up with a 200 status code. Any questions on this code? I will obviously slack it out here in a moment. But basically, we're doing what we've been doing today with serving the HTML, right? The only tricky thing, or the couple tricky things are, one, we got to handle the post request. So that's slightly different. And we have to handle the post request by also sending back HTML as opposed to just console logging or whatever. And two, we have to make sure that our form in HTML is set up properly to go to the right URL. Now, I'm pretty sure you can do relative URLs. I don't think you need the entirety of the URL. Let's just verify. Yeah. So you don't actually need to do the full URL name. You just need to do the relative path to your current URL. And our current URL is localhost 8080. So I'm going to slack this out for you, and what's going to happen is Chris is going to come go over the homework real quick. Alright, you ready? Alright, Chris is going to go over the homework, and then we'll be good to go. What? This is 13. We went over 12 on Wednesday.
13 was Amazon.
No, that was 12.
I looked at 12. Okay. Well, I'm dumb. All right. So this homework is going to be friend finder. So basically, you answer a few basic questions, and then you find the friend with the greatest compatibility. Well, this is not intended for dating. However, if that's how it goes, you know. So my suggestion, I went over. I was reading like the stuff for homework 12. So I didn't actually read the homework 13, but it looks like here's the instructions. In this activity, you'll build a compatibility-based friend finder application. Well, I guess it is a dating app. Maybe I could use it. This full stack site will take in results from your user surveys, then compare the answers with those from other users. The app will then display the name and picture of the user with the best overall match. I'm not going to go over the entire instructions, but what I will say is that if you follow the instructions step by step, most of these instructions that I've read, they're very, very in-depth. You just follow it step by step and break it down into just one thing after another, and it'll end up going pretty well. But let's see. Looks like your survey should have 10 questions. Your server.js file should require the basic npm packages. Make sure that you guys do an npm init, but do that before you install any of your npm packages, because if you npm init and then you npm -- save, then it'll save it as a dependency, and then when we go to download your code, we can just npm install, and boom, we have everything right there. That's the way you would do it. You know, outside of class too. So anyhow, your HTML route should include a get route and a default catch-all route. Your API route should contain 2 routes, a get and a post. And let's see, you should save your application's data inside of app/data/friends.js. So you're going to need to write to this path right here. Determine the user's most compatible friend using the following as a guide. Just go through that. That'll kind of give you what to do. Submission on BCS. Please submit to with your GitHub repository, and let's see, this one, both, it's Heroku and GitHub repository this time. And anyone, so like when we do these kind of projects, or like any code that we have to pull down, make sure that you've got it in its own individual repository, because if not, then we have to go, like if you're using kind of like a UA repository and then you've got all these subfolders, then we have to go pull your entire UA repository instead of just one small project. And then there's a minimum requirements here, and then hosting on Heroku. Heroku is really simple, but if you guys have problems with that, Do what?
We're covering it next class.
Okay, yeah. So, and then also your READMEs. Your READMEs should be contain good documentation. Just give the information there that people need when, that other developers are gonna be, because most people who are gonna use this, in any kind of app that you put out, they're not gonna go read the source code, but other developers will. So make sure things that are important to you, like if you were to look at someone else's project and you had no information about it, what would you want to know, right? That'd be good to put in there, and things like that. And then add it to your portfolio. And then I guess there's one more thing. If you have any questions about this project or material we covered, please post them in the community channels in Slack so that your fellow developers can help you. If you're still having trouble, come to office hours. Well, that's pretty normal. All right, so let's go to the survey real fast. It's taking in, it's requiring your name, and then it's requiring a link to your image, right? So you're gonna want to store that image. You never want to store an image inside of a database that isn't optimized for images. So always store a link to it, because if you store an image, it's gonna be really slow to upload and really slow to download, because they're stored, I think, as binary. They're called a blob. So anyways, it's asking question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, and these are all just kind of basic. Your mind is always buzzing with unexplored ideas and plans, strongly, and this actually kind of feels like an ADD, one of those ADD inventories. But anyways, let me see. I'll just give them some answers. I'll go really neutral on all this. See if this one actually works. It may or may not.
I'm taking the survey yet. I'm not on the platform.
Yeah. All right. Oh. If you would like to, I mean, I think that really when it comes to the UI, it doesn't there's a whole lot of requirements around the UI, so you can really do. You can do Likert scales that go across, or you can do something like this, or you can do radio buttons that go up and down. It all depends on your individual preference, but I would always say in a project like this, the back end is more important, but if you're good and you get the back end done, then work on the front end, but always consider the user, right? So what would the user want to see? What's going to give the user cues and hints and tips to be able to fill this out correctly? All right. Oh, I didn't put my name. All right, let's see. We're gonna do.
This is the example of a bad user.
Captain. Yeah. I am. You can't. Let's see. I don't have a link to. Yeah. Just gonna put google.com in there. All right. Yeah, we'll submit. And the best match that came up is CC. So it's using an alert on this one. I would say that, yeah, generally speaking, alerts are not something that people enjoy because they come up at the very top of the screen, usually up here, and they're really ugly. But this one actually looks like a modal from React. So that doesn't look too bad, but you guys probably are not going to be developing this in React, so you can use an alert if you want to, or find another way to display it on the screen that shows them. I would just make all of this close up like that, and then I would display the result right in the HTML there. So any questions? Go ahead.
Quick FYI before we leave. If your Tuesday, Thursday, and your theory about homework didn't have a reading with pictures, something proving for something you don't have to read. So update that.
All right, so let me say that again. If you are Tuesday, Thursday, and your Larry bot does not have a README with pictures and videos, you don't have a grade yet. So please update that. Any questions? All right, back to Carson.
Last thing, make sure you have a Heroku account before next class. Go to Heroku.com or whatever, and I'll Slack out the link. Just make sure you got that set up. Try to set it up on your machine with the CLI. Otherwise, you're good to go.